pretty well and faithfully. Why not just sit back? It won't cost us anything, and we can enjoy the benefits of His kingdom. Why not? Well, let's put aside for the moment this morning two of the most compelling reasons for participating in the role of Jesus in the world. The fact, for example, that loving and grateful hearts want to express gratitude to Jesus for His death for our sins. Or the fact that we are willing to serve the King because that's why we were saved. That's why He adopted us into His family. Now, putting aside for a moment those extremely compelling reasons for saying yes to this help wanted ad put out by Jesus, let me see if I can suggest us, or if I can encourage us even more by suggesting three other reasons for offering ourselves to serve under the rule of King Jesus in this world. These are reasons alluded to by Jesus Himself in His teachings on His kingdom rule. According to Jesus, what's in it for those of us who make the choice to devote ourselves to serving King Jesus now in the world? Well, consider these three benefits mentioned by Jesus in His teaching. First, and perhaps the most practical reason, having to do with our present situations, is the King's promise of provision of the basic necessities of life. The King's promise of provision of the basic necessities of life, meaning King Jesus' full intention of meeting every need of those of us who will serve Him faithfully. In fact, I want to go out on a limb and suggest something here this morning. I want to suggest here that sometimes, not always, but on more occasions than many people want to admit, that sometimes you and I can experience shortages in the basic necessities of life because we are living far more for ourselves than for the King of Heaven. No, not always. There are times when the economic climate of a culture can put us in difficult financial positions. There are also some times where God will allow us to experience shortages to test our faith in His love of us and His ability to provide for us. Paul testified of going through times like that. But there are also times where I think we do experience shortages in the basic necessities of life because we have been living more for ourselves than the King Jesus of heaven and the universe. On the other hand, if we do seek to devote ourselves to carrying out our role for the King in the kingdom Jesus is building, under His leadership, doing His will, do you know what He has promised? Matthew 6, verse 33. In Matthew 6, verse 33, speaking of the basic necessities of life, Jesus instructs His followers this way. He says, seek first His kingdom. Carry out the role and work in His kingdom for which Jesus selected you, and do so as the first priority in your days, even before the pursuit of temporal blessings like food and clothing. Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, meaning the way of living that He has told us in His Word marks those who are truly subjects of His kingdom. Let the work of His kingdom and the way of living to which He has directed us in His Word engross us so entirely, and Jesus' promise, then all these things, the basic necessities of life, will be added unto you. He is saying that you give me first priority, you do my kingdom work, you live my kingdom way, and I'll see that all the basic necessities of your life are taken care of. The King who called us into his kingdom will provide for his faithful servants. Don't we see that principle as happening in the life of Abraham, as his servant testified in Genesis 24, verses 34 and 35? So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, so that he has become rich. And he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. In other words, in his life of faith and service to God, did not Abraham find all his needs met, and even more so in abundance? But maybe Augustine hit on something many centuries ago when he observed of Christians around him that God is more anxious to bestow his blessings on us than we are to receive him. And I think that is especially true if it requires us to go against the flow of culture, or if it means saying no to some of the attractions of this life, or if it means fighting our own internal desires for greater comfort and less work. It is not easy in this world to devote our energies to doing the best we can to carry out the roles the King has assigned us in his kingdom. It is not at all an easy choice for any of us to make. But what if we think of it as Jesus here is speaking? What if we understand that in so doing, there comes this wonderful promise from the King that he will provide all the basic necessities of our life? That the King is guaranteeing to meet the needs of those who faithfully serve him. Is that enough to move you to apply as a kingdom servant? To know that if I serve this King, he will meet all my needs according to his riches in glory? Is that enough to answer the ad? Or here's another promise King Jesus gives. Another promise he gives in his teachings about his kingdom to those who will devote themselves to serving under his kingdom rule. This one is the King's promise of an attractive radiance. The promise of an attractive radiance. And no, I do not mean physical beauty. Plenty of us in this church have enough of that already. In fact, the glow up here is overwhelming. No, that's not what I mean. When I say that Jesus has promised an attractive radiance, I mean that the King is promising to his faithful subjects a demeanor, a character that will draw people to our Christ. Consider Dorothy, who spent several weeks in prayer and training to lead a Bible discussion group. Finally, the big day arrived for her to teach her first class. But getting her family of 6 out the door became far more hectic than she was used to. Breakfast didn't turn out right. Several arguments began going on among the children. And Dorothy, quickly getting frazzled, tried to regain her composure. In the midst of the bedlam, her husband entered the kitchen, surveyed the uproar, and announced to the kids, "Kids," he said, "settle down. Your mom has only 45 minutes until she has to become a radiant Christian." What Jesus says in his teachings on his kingdom rule is that he is willing to make that kind of thing happen for us. He even promises in Matthew 13, verse 43, that a day is coming when the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of the Father. Meaning that there will be a radiance about us. The King will have brought that about through the work of his Spirit in our lives as we have been faithfully carrying out his purpose on earth. We will shine forth as the sun. So says Jesus, "He who has ears, let him hear. And how do we know that this is happening to us even now if we serve the King and his kingdom work upon earth? Do you remember these words of Jesus we studied a couple of weeks ago? Do you remember Matthew 5, verses 14 and 15, where Jesus says to his faithful subjects, "You are the light of the world," not will be, but are, "put on a lampstand, which gives light to all who are in the house." We also have Paul's words to the Philippian church, where he describes the followers of Jesus in Philippians 2, verse 15, as children of God above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. That is to say, it is happening. It will continue to happen. It will reach its ultimate expression when Jesus returns and we go to be with him forever. The follower of Jesus, devoted to serving the great King in this world, will see it such taking place within them. The King will so work within us, as D. Martin Lloyd-Jones has said it, that as we walk up and down the streets of life, people will be struck and attracted, struck by us. And they will look at us and they will think, what is this person? I have never seen anybody quite like this before. That is the kind of people we will be. And when we become such people, Martin Lloyd-Jones says, believe me, the revival we are longing for will start. And people outside, in their misery and wretchedness, will come in and want to know all about it. This is guaranteed from the King. This is promised by the King to all of those who will carry out their purposes in his kingdom plan. He will make us attractive as we serve him. He will make us attractive as the will of the Father becomes our food every day. He will make us attractive to a world that has become so conditioned to shutting out those who only speak good-sounding Christian words. So you see the point, don't you? What if we understand that in devoting myself to serving the King in any way he desires, there's not only come the provision of all my basic necessities of life, but God is going to do something in me that is going to become so attractive, it is going to draw people more to Christ, hopefully, and to me, but it will draw them to him. If I answer the help wanted ad, I say, I am here, Lord, to be a subject of the King, that's what the King's going to do for me. As I faithfully serve him, he will give within me that kind of character, that kind of countenance that will draw people to Christ and possibly to his church. Does that prospect? Is that prospect enough to move you to want to apply as a kingdom servant? He'll provide all the basic necessities of life, and he will build a radiance within you that will draw other people to himself. Is that appealing at all to you? And here's a third one. Another reason Jesus gives in his teaching on the kingdom for choosing to follow him and for choosing to do his kingdom work as he directs. Here, what I want to mention is that if we follow this King, there is also the King's promise of God's authority being behind what we do. Of God's authority being behind what we do. That as I serve the King, as I follow his instructions, as I submit to his directions, God is going to put his full authority behind me and produce the kind of effectiveness that he desires for his kingdom. It will flow behind me and through me as I do the will of the King. Which takes us to one of the most difficult and misunderstood statements of Jesus in the gospel.